My wife called while I was visiting a client in another state. I'm divorcing you, and I've already sold the apartment to start my life with my new boyfriend. Enjoy looking for a place. She laughed. I kept calm and told her sounds good. But little did she know a surprise awaited her. The conference room buzzed with chatter as I glanced at my phone, its screen lighting up with an incoming call from Gina. I stepped out into the hallway expecting the usual small talk. How's the trip? When will you be home? Instead, Gina's voice came through cold and smug. I'm divorcing you, she said, her tone almost triumphant. I've already sold the apartment, so you'll need to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity of it, the complete lack of remorse, it was almost laughable. My hand tightened around the phone as her words sunk in. You sold the apartment? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Yeah, she said with a dry laugh. Nico and I need the money to set up our life together. He deserves better than a tiny place like that anyway. Nico. The name stung, though I'd suspected for months that there was someone else. Gina's late nights, her sudden work trips, and the mounting distance between us all pointed to a third party. But to hear her speak his name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their life, lit a fire in my chest. Sounds good, I replied evenly. There was no way I was giving her the satisfaction of hearing me crack. My name is Ray. And up until that phone call, I thought I'd married a woman I could trust. Gina and I had been together for 6 years. And while things hadn't always been perfect, I believed in our partnership. We'd worked hard to buy our apartment, a cozy 2-bedroom in the city that I'd fallen in love with the moment I saw it. It wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of everything we'd built together, or at least that's what I'd thought. Looking back, there had been signs, small cracks in the foundation I'd ignored. Gina's dismissive attitude whenever I asked about finances, her tendency to brush off my concerns with a charming smile and a quick kiss. I'd always assumed her confidence came from knowing what she was doing. Now I realized it came from knowing she could manipulate me. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I sat through client meetings, nodding at all the right moments while my mind raced. Gina thought she'd won. She thought she could pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I'd worked so hard for, and walk away scot-free. But there was one crucial detail she didn't know. The apartment deed had been in my name alone for months. I'd had it transferred after we refinanced earlier in the year, a move Gina had agreed to without much thought because it meant a lower interest rate. She'd never bothered to ask about the details or read the paperwork she'd signed. Her carelessness was going to be her undoing. By the time I returned to my hotel room that evening, my shock had turned into resolve. I wasn't going to cry or beg. Gina wanted a fight? Fine. But this was a fight I was going to win. The first call I made was to Sammy, my lawyer and longtime friend. I laid out the situation in painstaking detail, my voice calm even as my pulse raced. She sold the apartment? She repeated incredulous. Does she even realize that she can't do that without your consent? Apparently not, I said, a hint of amusement creeping into my tone. She thinks she's already spent the money on her new life with Nico. Sammy laughed dryly. Well, she's in for a rude awakening. The sale is invalid. You can prove sole ownership, and if she's taken any money from the buyer, she's on the hook for fraud. The word fraud sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. What do we need to do? I asked. First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale isn't legal, Sammy said. Then we'll draft a formal letter for Gina, outlining the consequences of her actions. If she's dumb enough to try anything else, we'll take her to court. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Gina thought she'd outsmarted me, that she'd left me powerless and scrambling. But in reality, she'd just set herself up for the ultimate humiliation. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, compartmentalizing my emotions, and channeling my energy into the task ahead. The betrayal hurt, but the prospect of reclaiming my life and watching Gina's smugness crumble gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. When I boarded the plane home, I was ready to face Gina, ready to dismantle her lies, and ready to start a new chapter without her. This wasn't just about winning. It was about taking back control. The flight home gave me hours to think about how everything had unraveled. Gina's arrogance was astounding. She hadn't even tried to hide her betrayal, as if I was just another obstacle to bulldoze on her path to freedom. But instead of spiraling into anger, I focused on what I'd do when I returned. Gina thought I was powerless, but she didn't realize I'd been playing a long game without even knowing it. As the plane touched down, my first call was to Sammy. I'm back, I said as I hauled my suitcase off the luggage carousel. What's the next step? We've already notified the buyer, she replied, her tone brisk and efficient. They were shocked, to say the least, and not too happy with Gina. They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case. And Gina? I asked. I sent the formal letter to her email this morning, she said. It outlines the illegality of the sale, your sole ownership of the apartment, and the potential consequences of fraud. She hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, she's going to be furious. Good, I thought. Let her stew. When I arrived home, the apartment was eerily quiet. Gina's things were still there. Her jackets draped over the chair, her shoes carelessly tossed by the door, but the place felt different, like the energy had shifted. I took a deep breath and set my suitcase down, knowing that the confrontation would come soon enough. Sure enough, Gina came storming in that evening, her face red with anger and her phone clutched in her hand. What the hell is this? She shouted, waving the letter Sammy had sent. You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine. No, Gina, I said calmly, crossing my arms. It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own. She froze, her face a mixture of confusion and rage. What are you talking about? So I grabbed the deed from the file I'd pulled earlier, holding it up for her to see. After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred to my name. You signed off on it, remember? Or did you just skim the paperwork like you always do? For a moment, she said nothing. Then her expression twisted into a sneer. You think you're so smart, don't you? This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal, and you're going to look like a fool when it all falls apart. I stared at her, unblinking. The sale is already void, Gina. The buyer knows it, and they're ready to take legal action if you don't return the money. Oh, and speaking of money, I took a step closer, lowering my voice. If you've spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even bigger trouble. Gina's confidence wavered for the first time. You don't know what you're talking about, she muttered, avoiding my gaze. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice steady. You've spent years treating me like I'm too naive to notice what you're doing. But guess what, Gina? I've been paying attention, and now you're going to deal with the consequences. She started pacing, her frustration mounting. This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here. I raised an eyebrow. Actually, I can. This apartment is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next move. But let me be clear. I'm not going anywhere. Over the next few days, Gina's anger turned into desperation. She called me repeatedly, leaving frantic voicemails that alternated between begging and threatening. Meanwhile, Sammy worked behind the scenes to ensure that every loose end was tied up. The buyer rescinded the agreement, furious at Gina for wasting their time and money, and Sammy drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings. You're in a good position, Ray, she told me during one of our meetings. Gina has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over her head, she'll have to cooperate if she wants to avoid a bigger mess. Her words were a relief, but they also reminded me just how much I'd allowed Gina to control my life. For years, I'd ignored her dismissiveness and arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight. But now, I saw how much I'd been giving up, and I was determined to take it all back. Lacey, my best friend, came over one evening to help me reorganize the apartment. We boxed up Gina's things, carefully stacking them in the corner of the living room. How's she taking all this? She asked, holding up one of her fancy scarves with a smirk. Not well, I said, laughing despite myself. She's still convinced she can talk her way out of it, but I'm not budging. Good, she said, tossing the scarf into the box. She doesn't deserve a single inch of your space or your time. I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her support. For so long, I'd felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional and financial burden while Gina took credit for everything. But now, I had people in my corner, and that made all the difference. The final piece of my plan fell into place the day Gina brought Nico to the apartment. I was sitting at the dining table reviewing some paperwork when they walked in like they owned the place. Nico looked around with a smug smile. His arm looped through Gina's. So this is where we're staying? He said, his voice dripping with entitlement. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshaken. No, I said,